I'm sitting on my steps because today we are talking about step parenting and blended family living. I want to answer one of the most frequently asked questions that I've gotten both on YouTube and in my personal life, which is, knowing what I know now, would I still become a stepmom? So I want to talk about what that question means, what I think people are actually asking when they ask me that question, and then give my personal answer, both from a perspective of faith and, if maybe you're not someone of faith, what I would recommend in that case too. So if this is interesting to you, keep on watching. I believe that the very question itself does a great job of showcasing one of the biggest struggles that I have in being a stepmom, and that is that my relationship both with my spouse and with my children are constantly being questioned and hyper-analyzed by other people. And that to me means a few things. And the first is, it's a reminder that it is so important not to let the opinions and incorrect assumptions of others influence the way we feel and cause us to be sad and internalize everything and take it the wrong way, because everybody has their opinion, sometimes they're wrong. And I also wouldn't recommend asking this question to a step parent that you know, at least not in this way. To provide an example, as we all know, every family experiences natural challenges just through the very nature of living with other people in a family situation. When a person is having natural challenges with their biological children, people often act with compassion and say, "Oh, it's just a phase, you'll get through it. Oh, I've been there," or "How can I help you?" But when there are natural struggles with a stepchild, automatically people say, "Oh, do you regret getting married? Do you not wish that you would have this stepchild?" So as you can see, with these natural challenges that will happen, and again, there are some more unique complications that do arise living in a blended family, but when things do happen, people question your entire marriage, your entire relationship, and you also have a lot of people, and at least I've experienced it, compare the way you treat your biological children, if you have them, to your stepchild. And it's just not fair for you, it's not fair for your stepchild, because it undermines the relationship that you two have and the relationship between your spouse and your family with your kids. So that's where, when I get this question, I do get frustrated, because it's something that you wouldn't ask to any other parent, but you would ask to a step parent. However, what I've grown to realize is the reason that people ask this question, I think, is primarily because they're wondering for themselves whether or not, if they decide to marry somebody who has a child, whether or not they will regret it. And I think that's a very fair and healthy question to ask and thing to think about, especially asking somebody who's been there and gone through the trenches of what it's like to live in the reality of being a step parent. And so to answer the question that I think when people ask this, they really want to know, will you regret it? Is it a bad idea? Well, my opinion, and again, this is my opinion as somebody who is a stepmom, is that it depends. And I think it depends on whether you are a person of faith or not. Regardless of anything, there are some situations where things just work out and everybody is so different. But I would say, as somebody of faith, and also answering whether I personally would marry somebody with kids knowing what I have now, I absolutely don't regret my relationship with my husband. There are definitely challenges, like I said, that I experienced that are really, really, really hard, more difficult than I ever imagined, but I still don't think it was a bad idea to get married or anything like that at all. And I think part of that is the realization of God's hand in it all. And that's where I say the perspective of faith is so important, not just realizing that, you know, God brought this child into my life for whatever reason, and I do believe that I am fully equipped to handle my role because it was given to me, and I'm in this situation for reasons beyond my understanding, or at least full understanding, but also my view of marriage is one from a perspective of faith, in that, you know, my relationship with my husband is the most important relationship in my life. He has that understanding too. And so we prioritize our relationship always above the kids. Now, that is not always a very common perspective, especially just in mainstream society. A lot of people think, well, the kids were here first. Kids are more important. And while initially it does make sense to think in that way, the reality is these children need an example of a loving, whole, married relationship. These children have had their biological parents ripped apart, their families split, okay? Whatever way that was. Sometimes it's very, very messy. Sometimes they were so young they don't know anything otherwise. But the thing is, they need your example. They need a loving, safe home life. And if you can't provide that to them, that is the greatest disservice. If they can't do soccer practice or all these events or hang out with friends all the time, they're gonna be okay. But if they don't have a loving, safe, protected home life, it's gonna cause a lot of damage and emotional problems. And especially for me, being a Catholic, I want my children, step, biological, adoptive, whoever they are, the children who are put into my home and entrusted to my care, I want them to feel loved and safe above all. And so my spouse and I have to be on the same page. That's so important. Not just on the same page, but just that constant example of love. And also when situations do arise that are frustrating, they need the example of people overcoming obstacles or disagreements. They need to see people working through problems through daily life and still being able to love each other and move forward together. And so that's the most important thing. I realized that these children, biological and my stepdaughter, they were entrusted to the care of my husband and myself. On our wedding day, when we gave our vows, being Catholic, we committed to lovingly accepting these children and raising them up in the faith. And that's what we're doing. And so my stepdaughter is not just his problem or his issue when different things come up. She's ours together. She's a child entrusted to our care. Sure, she has her own mother and we respect her and everything, but when it comes to our own home, she's one of our children. And that's just how it is. A few other things that are important to note too, when situations do come up, which they will, and I was just surprised how fast early on in our relationship, things became very tough, just blending our family together. Another important thing is my husband and I both seek counsel when things are not going very well. For instance, we came to a point where we just felt like there was a lot of tension in our home life. There was a lot of stress because of our blended family situation. So we talked about it, and together we went to seek outside help. And for us, that was a priest, and just meeting with him, I think we met with him like once a month for a few months, and it completely transformed our lives, like even permanently. I mean, there's just have been things, just these little tips he's given us that we have actually put into practice. That's the key. When you get advice from outside people, you have to actually implement the advice. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes they'll tell you, you know what? You need to pray with your stepchild. And at first you're like, awkward. I don't want to do that. But once you get through that and you try it, you can see transformational changes. So things like that, there were just a lot of great tips he gave us. So being able to seek outside help when needed is so important. And then also prayer. Like I said, praying with your children, praying together as a couple, praying individually is so important because you need to be spiritually strengthened to get through a lot of the stuff. I think being a stepmom, one of the biggest things that it has been challenging me on is my patience and, kindness, having a loving and open heart, even to people who are disrespectful to you, who completely don't agree with you and undermine your relationship with everybody in your family. You have to start to be merciful and compassionate. And so that's where faith has played a huge role for me. But with that said, there are some instances where you may not be a person of faith, or it just may not be a big priority to you. You're just kind of living your life. You meet someone, they have a kid, you're not really sure what to do. And I would say in that circumstance, I would avoid it. I really would, because not saying that it can't work, but it requires a lot of intentionality, a lot of open-heartedness, a lot of just things that I don't know how people would get through it without prayer and without the grace of God and the sacrament of marriage. So from me, and that's my opinion, again, I'm not saying you can't do it. Tons of people do. But I am saying that there are a lot of really difficult challenges that come up. And you have to be prepared to stick with your spouse through it all. When you're in the time of dating, everything is so happy and you have these somewhat fantasy ideas in your head that everything's gonna work out a certain way, and realistically it may not. And so I just think coming down to what is the core of your belief about marriage? Do you believe it is a lifelong commitment? Because these children deserve to see that example. And if you just think marriage is a piece of paper or, all these things don't really matter, I would not advise you to start that type of relationship, especially when there are children involved, because it does add a lot of complications. So that's just my opinion, like I said. And as for me, I don't regret it. It has made my marriage strengthened as we work through it together. And ultimately, if both your spouse and you are on the same page and you're prioritizing God in your life, things will run so much more smoothly in this type of situation. I hope that's given you a little bit of insight, maybe some encouragement. I know for me, being a stepchild myself, I thought I was the expert on living in a blended family. But now that the tables have turned and I'm the step-parent, I cannot praise my stepdad enough for dealing with me. It's definitely just an interesting dynamic, and it, like I said, it takes a lot of mercy, grace, peace, working through things, working to know your stepchild, and it's totally possible to have peace and joy in a blended family. But from my personal experience, a lot of that has come from prayer and the grace of God. So I just wanted to share that with you today, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye!